Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the EpiDoc and Geo-annotation workshop at the Ilia State University. It's a great pleasure for us to host this event, and above all, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today and for making this international workshop possible. My special thanks go to our guest from King's College London, Professor Gabriel Bodat, one of the co-authors of EpiDoc guidelines, working in the field of Greek and Latin epigraphy and papyrology, digital humanities in general, and Valeria Vitale, digital humanists and 3D modeler interested in the representations and interpretations of ancient places and objects. Together with Professor Bodat, we have implemented several important stages of our project Epigraphic Corpus of Georgia. He is, how to say, unofficial head of our project and also unofficial supervisor of my PhD student Tamar Achidashvili. It is with his advices and support that we overcame all technical difficulties and challenges related to the project, for which I'd like to express my sincere appreciation. And now, before I give the floor to Professor Bodat, I would like to ask a few words about the importance maybe of this project and of internationalization of Georgian, multilingual Georgian epigraphy in general. It is known that the study of Georgian epigraphy since 18th century has been connected with European scholars and collectors who traveled in Georgia as members of various societies, including Asian Society of France, Germany, Austria, and Russia. It was through the effort of those scholars that the first inscriptions from Georgia were printed in Germany and France. In the second half of 19th century, the famous German archaeologist and natural scientist Gustav Rade and then Karl Friedrich Lehmann-Haupt were the first studied multilingual Georgian epigraphy, that is epigraphical heritage found or preserved in Georgia from a scholarly perspective. At the beginning of 20th century, Georgian scholars working in Germany, most importantly Ivane Javachishvili and his students, Tina Tinkaukchishvili above all, started a new stage in Georgian epigraphy. Ivane Javachishvili's book, published in 1926, attests how close Georgian epigraphy of the time to European scholarly perspective. You know, in the Soviet period, the Georgian epigraphy and science in Georgia in general went into isolation. In the post-Soviet time, in so-called 19th, it was time not only unfavorable for the development of science and epigraphy and papyrology in Georgia, but very extremely difficult in general, despite individual scientists who succeeded in internationalizing their research projects. The post-Soviet Georgian science remained in deep isolation. Even with occasional successes, the slow and maybe controversial process of modernizing science and research and education in the country in general, it started in 2006. We see it was hardly able to make science in Georgia international, that is to speak the same language with our Western colleagues. So this is a given fact with a rather unflattering background. But on the other hand, we can be proud with our younger generation, who most of all needs a space for discussions here in Georgia as well as abroad, to fill the gaps in their education caused by the mentioned decline. And on this challenging way, it is crucial for us, for post-Soviet Georgian scientists, to share international experience, your best practice, and to engage in large-scale joint educational and research projects, such as our project, Epigraphic Corpus of Georgia, yours project under the head of Levan Gordesiani and Irina Darcia, and also educational project, structured PhD program in digital epigraphy, digital prosopography and corpus computational linguistics, which is the first PhD program in digital humanities in Georgia. I hope this workshop will help us to intensify our collaboration with our European partners to make it more successful. So now I will not take up any more of your time, and I will give the floor to our guest speaker, Professor Bodart. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, and looks okay. And also for the invitation to come and meet with you here in Tbilisi for a week. This is a great privilege for us. We're extremely pleased. I always feel I should start with an apology, coming to a country with a wonderful language as you do, that we're going to come and we're going to speak English. So that's. That always comes with an apology. So we're going to talk a little bit about two closely related research communities in digital humanities, related to, but not exclusive to classics. And so I will talk for a few minutes first about EpiDoc, a community for encoding of epigraphic information in digital form, and Valeria will then talk a little bit about Pelagios, which is a community similarly for working with linking different kinds of data together, specifically around, but not only around place and geographic information. And then at the end, we want to just throw up a few suggested common threads between the two discussions. But we're very much interested in discussion with you with that, and conversation with you. So we'll try to finish the presentation as quickly as possible and move on to conversation and so forth with you, because we're very much interested in your perspectives on this. So this is just a quick structure of the background and history of EpiDoc. I always describe EpiDoc via its history, because it's that's the best way of explaining why it is what it is and the way it works the way it does. So these are the four main stages of EpiDoc's history, and then a few suggestions as to what its future might look like in the fifth point there, but we'll come to those in a moment. So EpiDoc came into being as a result of two things, both of which happened in around 1999. The first was that there were several meetings of a commission of the Association Internationale de l'Épigraphie Grecque et Latine, which was the EAGLE Commission, the Electronic Archive of Greek and Latin Epigraphy, which in their 1999 meeting published in the minutes this note from Silvio Pancera, who was the chair of this commission, saying that whatever program or format we end up using for this integrated archive of Greek and Latin epigraphy, it needs to be able to export its documents in this DTD format, or in other words, in XML. At about the same time, at the Ancient World Mapping Center in the University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Tom Elliott, Hugh Kalis, and Amy Hawkins and others were having a conversation about how to express Latin epigraphy in electronic form, and they decided, with the publication of the EpiDoc guidelines for the first time at around the same time, to use XML as the language of encoding for this. And so they chose to use this flavor of XML. XML is a language that's very useful for encoding different kinds of information, and it's used for everything. It's the language of the web as we know it. So all web pages are encoded in a form of XML. All databases include some sort of XML encoding. Financial information is encoded in XML. So they used this format called TEI, which is XML for literary and linguistic corpora. They also made the decision that they would follow the Leiden conventions for the distinctions that they were going to encode in TEI XML, rather than attempting to reinvent the way we've done epigraphy. Leiden distinctions, of course, have existed for almost 100 years. 70 years at the time that this conversation was happening, and so we shouldn't try to reinvent the way the discipline works. But rather than using the symbols of the Leiden conventions, they used exactly the same distinctions but encoded them in this XML language. And so this was partly, as I say, based on the existing text encoding initiative XML and customized that for epigraphic information so that the epigraphic encoding could participate in this larger community and benefit from the existing art of that community. There were then several stages in the development of EpiDoc that all, and I won't go into each one in detail because I have enough slides to talk for an hour otherwise, and I want to talk for a third of that, each contributed to the development of EpiDoc specifically via funded projects and via the work that people were doing toward the publication of individual corpora. So the inscriptions of late antiquity, the inscriptions of Aphrodisias, through these projects and through a calendar of workshops that were held. I think about 9 or 10 workshops were held in the 3 years of the Inscriptions of Aphrodisias project that worked very hard to develop compatibility between EpiDoc and other disciplines, in particular other disciplines that were already grappling or just beginning to grapple with digital representation of their work, such as numismatics, sigillography, prosopography, and various other disciplines, papyrology, and so forth. This was very much a way to help to make EpiDoc slightly more universal rather than simply catering for the Latin inscriptions that Tom Elliott and his colleague had started working on in 2000 and the Roman-era Greek inscriptions that the inscriptions of Aphrodisias were working on, both of whom contributed a lot of development to this project, but also to enable it to cater as widely as possible to other projects. A little later, from about 2008 to 2012, the papyri.info project, funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, put a lot of resources into developing EpiDoc further. This did a lot of work on converting existing databases of papyri, in this case, to EpiDoc. They built a search and browse platform for papyri, and they also developed a tagless editing interface for EpiDoc. And there was a lot of documentation and a lot of dissemination and training came out of this project. So a lot of the way EpiDoc looks now is as a result of this collaboration between the epigraphic standards which had already existed and the papyrological development of that. Later, the Europeana Eagle project, now the Eagle Network, did again a lot of work on developing accessible applications for EpiDoc. So a lot more work on converting databases into EpiDoc, on building tools and apps around EpiDoc, including the storytelling app, including apps connected to Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons for linking images of inscriptions to the databases, for linking translations to their inscriptions, and all sorts of other work. And they also did a lot of very, very important work on vocabularies for encoding epigraphic information. And so these are some of the things I've just mentioned. Thinking to the future now, that's more or less where we stand. There are 3 things which I think are going to be important to the development of EpiDoc as we go forward. And these are publication, how to make it possible to publish a corpus of inscriptions from EpiDoc without a large and well-funded development team behind you. So big projects like the papyri.info, like the inscriptions of Aphrodisias, like the inscriptions of Libya, like the inscriptions of the Northern Black Sea, like the Vindolanda tablets, like US epigraphy, various other projects that have published using EpiDoc have all done so because they've had large grants and they've been able to hire digital humanities programs at their own institutions or elsewhere to build a publication platform for them. The thing that's missing from the ecosystem around EpiDoc, therefore, is the ability for a scholar, either working on their own, a scholar without a large grant, or a scholar at an institution without a large digital humanities unit, to pay for or do this development work for them of building a website and transforming these XML files with epigraphic or papyrological data into something which can be delivered on the web. So we're currently working on developing this tool called FS, which stands for EpiDoc Front-End Services, but also not so subtly alludes to a very nice beer from Turkey. And this tool is again funded by the Mellon Foundation. The idea of this tool is that it's a basic publication tool, and it will have indexing functionality and a search interface, which does a very small amount of default transformation and publication, but also is very simple to customize. This was the aim. Tamara can attest that that it is possible to customize, but simple might be putting it a little too strongly. There are, in fact, we've trained a couple of dozen people in the use of the FS tool, and only 3 of the people who we've worked with have ever actually learned it well enough to use it and transform it and publish their inscriptions using it themselves, and Tamara is one of them. Another is someone who I'm also externally supporting their PhD in Venice, and another is Charlotte Rouchet, who's not your average epigrapher either. So I'm currently thinking about a plan B, which is how can we actually make FS so it really does serve someone who doesn't have a lot of technical support and isn't willing to learn to become a programmer and a coder themselves. For this plan, we intend to build slightly more by way of publication, indexing, search, and visualization features, including geographic visualization features, time visualization features, connections to prosopography, but also more than just half a dozen indexes to show you what the potential is and expect you to transform it, to customize it, but rather maybe 20 or 30 or more indexes, so that almost everything you could want to index in an epigraphic corpus will be there. And if you really need to customize it, then you can learn how to. But that if you really don't have any support whatsoever and you're not willing or able to learn to code, to customize it yourself, you don't have to. So that's where we currently stand. We're currently in between the Plan A, which has been built but is not as user-friendly and simple as I had hoped when we first built it, and Plan B, which is currently seeking funding. So this is the next step of this. The second of the 3 things that I wanted to talk about as something which is contributing to the future of EpiDoc is one of several projects in the linked open data space, and this is something that Valeria will talk more about in a minute, which is very much about linking and creating a graph, a network of multiple different kinds of data. And there's various different ways to link between types of data. You can link between texts based on their content, you can link based on their location, and there's several different kinds of location related to text, right? There's where they were written, where the objects on which they were written were found, where those objects are now, where they're published, all sorts of different kinds of connections. You can connect things based on the people within them, you can connect things based on objects, and you can base things around time. Time is one of the most important things. It's not necessarily adequate on its own as a connection, because just finding texts from the late 6th century is maybe not adequate if you don't have some other dimension such as place or language or genre to help you narrow it down. But it is extremely important, because just place is not enough on its own either if you don't have other things to connect it. And so one of these projects is Godot, the graph of dated objects and texts, which is being run at the University of Heidelberg by Frank Grieshaber and several others, which is creating linked data potentials for date expressions in texts and helping to connect those. There's also a movement, and some of the people involved in it are listed on this slide. This is just the first workshop that was held mid last year on linked epigraphy. And the idea about this is looking at various different ways in which inscriptions in particular can be linked across collections and between and across different kinds of materials. All of these slides are available, by the way. I should have mentioned that when the title slide was up. I'll show you again at the end the short link if anyone wants to take a copy of these slides. So that's probably about as much as I want to say about where I think. So this is where I think EpiDoc has come from and where it's going. What the main commonality between all that is about community and collaboration. All of these things are done as a result of collaboration. These are some of the common threads that I predict will emerge between what I've just said and what Valeria is about to say, but we'll come back to these. This slide is duplicated again at the end, and this is not something we're going to talk through. We very much want to use these as prompts to talk with you. But I will hand over to Valeria to talk about the second half of this now.
Thank you, Gabi, and I want to renew my gratitude for being here. It's a great opportunity. I'm very excited. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna introduce the project I work on. It's called Pelagios, and the aim of Pelagios is to create a network of documents to study the ancient places, to study the ancient world, and to connect these documents on the basis of their commonplace references. What does that mean? So, for example, we have the same ancient place that is mentioned in different epigraphies, that is mentioned in different primary sources, that is mentioned in primary and secondary sources. So we can create a connection between these documents, but we don't have to limit ourselves to text. We can have common references to places. Also, if we think of coins, if we think of that column there stands for epigraphy. I couldn't find a better icon. If we think for objects. But this is just one way to think of linking information. Of course, an epigraphy can mention more than one place or can be related to more than one place, as Gabi was saying. Maybe one is the place that is mentioned, and one is the place where the museum where it's held now, and objects can be related to each other without any connections whatsoever with place. So we will be focusing on connections related to places. And the technology that Pelagios uses, that relies on, is linked open data. And you probably already know linked open data, even if you're not aware of that. It's an ubiquitous technology, maybe not in its open format, but linked data are behind, Google, Europeana, Amazon. A lot of the semantic web is based on linked data technology. And linked open data, I'm going to try to define it very, very quickly, but if you're coming to the workshop, you will hear much more about it. It's about making statements about things. And we call these things, let's say, entities. And we can make statements about anything. These entities can be anything. They can be people, they can be places, they can be dates, they can be objects. And we make these statements using very formalized languages that are called ontologies. But the crucial thing is that when we refer to these entities, we use a unique code to identify them. So that, whoever makes statements of any nature about that entity, the computer, the machine will recognize that we're talking about the same thing, and there will be a link established. So this is very briefly how linked open data work. And when we started presenting the project to research communities, everyone was really excited because they were like, okay, that is great. If we can connect information, of course, there is more value. First of all, we have more information because we have our information, our research, and someone else's research. But we also have the connection between our research, which is an extra value, of course. And the information becomes much richer, more varied, it's multidisciplinary, we have different points of view. So, of course, everyone agreed, oh, this is great, but how do we do it? And because we were talking mostly to humanists, a lot of people said, okay, we don't have the time to learn that formalized language that you require to make these statements, so goodbye. So we didn't want to lose those people, so we worked basically in 3 directions to facilitate the access to this technology, because we thought that this technology is really the key. It's really the next big thing. And the first thing that we did was developing a proof of concept, just to show what you can do when you start linking information, even with a short, just a few contributors. So we developed this, I say we, but actually our developer, Rainer Simon, did. I like to say we because, sounds cool, but I didn't do any of the development. He did this awesome web-based visualization tool that visualizes linked open data. This is just the first half of our contributors. It's a very short list, but it's just a proof of concept. We kept it short. The platform is called Peripleo. It's free. You can find it online. You can play with it. I will show a little bit of Peripleo during the workshop. You can search by place, you can search by object, and you will find all the hits that come from the different databases that have connected the information, all based on the common place references. Another thing that we did, we created an annotation platform that allows you to upload your documents, and this is, again, something that we will see at the workshop, and then you create place annotations or other kind of annotation, but let's talk about the place annotations in text. You can, geo-resolve them against gazetteers with coordinates. You can visualize them on the map. You can use tags to differentiate the annotations. And you can also annotate images. And the great thing about this platform that, again, is free, it's open source, it's on GitHub, you can go there and just download it. And customize it if you like, is that after you create these annotations in a very, very simple, straightforward highlight, click, and write, you can then download them in that formal language that is required to do linked open data, and that you don't need to know, you don't need to learn it, you just download it, that as well as other formats like XML, TI, and other formats that are available. But I think that the most interesting work that we did, our, let's say, third stream of development, was building the community. And we really put a lot of effort into doing that. And it's not easy to build a community, and we had to have people working full-time on that. And, this is my job that was part of what I was asked to do. And what we did was organizing a lot of training, like this one, organizing networking events. We had a forum, we have a blog, we have a very active, GitHub communication channel where people can send us tickets for our developer. We tried as much as we could to collaborate with other projects that were doing similar things. We didn't see them as competitors. We thought that was just, very narrow-minded. We saw them as, potential partners, and we tried to build bridges with them. And we also tried to find a common best practice that could be shared and we could, all use. And one of our most successful, I think, initiatives, and I'm very happy to say that here, so maybe you will think of applying, is this small grants funding scheme. So we fund small projects that, let's say, are beneficial to the entire community of Pelagios. They are small grants. We can, talk more about that, but I just wanted to mention that. And funding with, we are funded by Melon, and Melon, through us, also funds these small projects. These also helped us establishing connections, enhancing collaboration, and creating those bridges that we were talking of before. But as, one of the best things that working with the community gave us is that they did things with our tools that we were not, we never thought of, we never imagined, and we were so pleased and so surprised. So, analyzing historical text that we were expecting, georeferencing and annotating maps that we were expecting. A lot of people using that for teaching. That was a very good surprise. Recogito proved to be a very effective teaching tool. some people started using it to train NER algorithms, and that now has become one of the available download formats. It wasn't there before, but because someone in the community started doing it, then the developer developed the right function for it. Some people used it to annotate different layers of multispectral images because they were doing palimpsest of ancient manuscripts. And Gabi was involved with me with this experiment. We used it to do crowd annotation of scanned manuscripts. That is a page from the Wood Archives, the expedition that Robert Wood led to Palmyra. And these are very quickly just some of the projects that have been funded by our scheme. So we fund the creation of new resources like new gazetteers. We try to enable better collaboration with existing projects. We funded initiatives to make existing resources more accessible to non-Anglo speakers and so on. But now, like all digital humanities projects, we are hitting, the hard point because our funding is, it's about to end. So how do we make all this work sustainable? How do we make this, survive? Because we won't be, the Pelagios investigative team won't be working full-time on this anymore at the end of the year. So what do we do? And this is something that I'm very interested in, discussing with you. What are the doable, the viable sustainability strategies for digital humanities project? What we want to do and what we are trying to do, it's really, trying to see if all that work that we did on collaboration and establishing links and establishing connections is going to work, is going to pay. Because yes, this is our plan so far. So to keep the development of Pelagios through the projects that we collaborated with. So it's a bit of a mutual help. But I'm very happy to start the discussion about sustainability, about collaboration, about all the other, let's say, common threads and discussion points that Gabi mentioned before. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Gabi and Valeria, for this wonderful presentation. And special thanks to Ilia State University and for Tamara and Nino for organizing such event and for boosting collaboration with this wonderful team. I'm really very happy that Gabi and Valeria are here because when I met Gabi some 4 years or 5 years ago in Sofia in Bulgaria, I had a dream to invite him in Georgia for such event. Unfortunately, we didn't manage. Other team came to deal with to teach digital humanities here in Tbilisi State University. And now I'm very happy that my dream came true after several years with the help and support of Ilia State University. I just wanted to express my feelings, that it's and my thoughts. It's very important that small country like Georgia and small and not really rich universities like Tbilisi State University or Ilia State University started to deal with digital humanities, and more or less we are becoming members of this huge society of digital humanities. And I want to thank you once again for your valuable support. With your digital presence, you were in Georgia for several years. And I would like to encourage younger generation, the students, young scholars which are here to attend the workshop which will start tomorrow. And digital humanities is one of the most important things you can do at any stage of your professional career. It is really very, very helpful, and it really opens another eye and you will see many other things in a different way. So, and I have another dream, which I hope will come true in a couple of years, to see Georgia and our universities somewhere in Pelagios and in your future projects as well. By the way, inspired by Gabi's workshop, by Gabi's and Simona's workshop I attended in Sofia some years ago, we made application to Rustoveli National Science Foundation and got funding and started digitalization of Greek inscriptions of Georgia. We already did part of the job, and we do hope that we'll finalize our project till the end of this year at least, and then we will be ready to become the members of this, let's say, virtually Pelagios society. And as our lecture and this discussion is recorded, I would like to say thanks to a guy, to Dimitar Iliev, to our dear Mitko, which organized this EpiDoc workshop in Sofia, and from that workshop actually we came here to Ilia State University. Thank you to everybody. Thank you. And good luck to your workshop, and good luck to everybody which will continue dealing with the digital humanities from tomorrow, or which will start tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's some very important points coming out of that, and I really wanted to follow up on your comment about how you appreciate the importance of being involved. Small countries, you say, like Georgia, being involved in this large network. We very much appreciate every single partner and contributor to these networks as well. And I'm sure Valeria will have comments about this as well. But from the EpiDoc perspectives, the unique features and needs of your epigraphy and of your ancient texts and medieval texts, working with those texts with EpiDoc and working with the encoding of those texts, that directly benefits EpiDoc, not only because of expanding the range and the scope of things that we can brag about, and we can say we have inscriptions from here and here and here using our standards, but because every slightly different community or discipline that starts using this, it forces EpiDoc to be more inclusive, and it forces EpiDoc to have more functionality and more capability than it had before. And so it forces us to extend our schema to be able to encode features that we didn't think of before, because when EpiDoc was just Latin epigraphy, there was lots of things they didn't think of. Greek introduced a whole bunch of new things. Papyrology introduced a bunch of new things. Southeast Asian epigraphy has added new ideas. Mayan epigraphy has added new things that we need to think about. Medieval Latin has added new concepts. So every community adds new things to it, to the tooling, to the transformation, and to the guidelines and so forth. We have the front page, as it were, of the EpiDoc guidelines in half a dozen different languages. Do we have it in Georgian already?
I have translation,
right,
which I give to my students, but it's not
right.
online.
But we haven't got that, so we'd love to add that to it. So I think that's something we would very much. I don't know if you wanted to add anything from the Pelagios perspective.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the linked open data, it's a great technology for smaller collections, less known, corpora and things like that, because it allows people to find more than they were looking for. So of course there will be a lot of people already looking specifically for, Georgian corpora, but if they're not, they might find information, connected to something else. They might, land on Georgian objects, Georgian, personalities and things like that, coming from somewhere else. It's not, it doesn't have a center, it takes you, to travels, to keep, the peripleo kind of metaphor. So, I think that it's a great opportunity to make the linked open data scenario richer and more interesting.
Well, and today I would like to mention one very important fact for development of digital humanities in Georgia. Again, with your help, it's a doctoral program in digital humanities of Ilia State University, which has been launched just this year or maybe last year, and Tamara is a first student. This is a very good background, very good basis for more sustainable development for digital humanities in Georgia. Because, you know, as you already mentioned, the projects start and the project ended. When you have this doctoral program, you have some basis for future developments.
Maya Ninidze, Javashvili State University. And I wanted to ask you about digital archives. We're going to prepare first Georgian digital archive of the 20th century, Guram Cheulishvili, and we are just choosing platform for it. And could you give us some advice about it?
I guess it depends a little bit on what is the format that your data is choosing. It's encoded in, it's a relational database. It's a
we want to synchronize image and the text, first of all. And it is the first time for us, and we just want to choose one of the best programs.
I mean, what I would say, not necessarily having...
yes, image of manuscripts.
Images of manuscripts, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. What I would say, not necessarily having the answer to this. So the first thing I would say is I don't think EpiDoc is the answer, because EpiDoc is very specific to a kind of text. So it's not that well suited to encoding manuscripts, which are not unique texts in the same way that inscriptions or papyri or coins or seals are. But depending on how much you want to analyze the texts themselves deeply, you might want to go with TEI, which is the larger language of which EpiDoc is a small part. But which is very good for encoding large amounts of text with quite deep annotation, and then analyzing and transforming and publishing that text in various different formats. But it does require a certain amount of investment of labor into that encoding. It's not the quickest way to do this sort of work. I mean, if you compare working in TEI to working in Microsoft Word, for example, it'll take you 10 times as long to do the TEI. If you need those extra features, then it's worth it. If you don't, then you might as well work in something much simpler. Like a database or just documents that you can link across to the images in a more a simpler way. But so what I would recommend, without having an answer to your actual question, is to look at how other people who have been doing similar things with archives like yours, see what they're doing and see to what degree you can share the infrastructure and the methods with those. We've done a little bit of experimenting with the Wood archive that Valeria mentioned, the archive of Robert Palmyra Wood, who was an explorer in the Middle East in the mid-18th century. And so we have 3,000 pages or so of his notebooks, which is a very small archive. But we've done some experiments with annotating those images, page images, using Recogito, the tool that Valeria talked about. And that's very useful for certain kinds of annotation. It probably wouldn't be the way we would want to digitize the entire archive in the most straightforward way. But there are other tools for it. So a lot of people, might well use something like Omeka as a tool for annotating these, for encoding and collecting these archives. But I can't really give any concrete advice on how to do those things. But I would say that one of the common threads that we've both talked about is don't do this alone. Find other people who are doing similar things and talk to them. I'm sorry that we're not those people, but do find other people who are doing this sort of work. And especially if you're interested in linking the text to the images, there are several major projects that have done that sort of work. There's text image linking engine, text image linking environment, various other tools. I mean, just text image linking will find you 10 results on Google of various different digital humanities projects who have done this sort of thing. So I would suggest talking to those people, talking to other libraries and archives about how they've done this. And most of them will document what they've done, what tools they've used, whether they've used TEI and published, and if so, are there free tools that have helped them to publish those results or not. So it's not so much an answer, but suggestion that do keep asking the question.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
Just a small addition. The people that sometimes use Recogito and have manuscript collections, it's becoming quite common to use the IIIF format. So it's IIIF. So I suggest you look into that for storing the images of very high quality, and then those images can, so you're already into that, so that's...
Thank you for coming today. Thank you for visiting our university, and I would like to thank, of course, Ilia State University and also Igna Darche, who organized the first EpiDoc workshop where I came to this community. And one major problem which we have in our project is choosing the right printed edition for the principal edition for the digital one, because the Georgian editions, printed editions, do not follow the Leiden conventions, and the only scholar who knew about these conventions was Tina Rauchishvili, and she only mentions this. She should not have known about that, and she only mentions that very shortly. So what we have to do is to put all these printed edition back in the shape of Leiden Convention. So think about them, because they do not use the same kind of symbols. Even the different ones use the different kinds of symbols, and that's the first problem we are dealing with.
But they're encoding the same kind of information, just with different symbols.
Yeah.
So the distinctions and the semantics are there, which is what's important.
And put that in a digital format. And I see here our students, and I'm very happy that they will have chance to listen to you, to work on their own works, projects and ideas, and finally to be included in the community. So thank you.
Here, the Rusთავelis National Science Foundation, who supported our project, and another project was also supported by Rusთავelis National Foundation. Your project, yes, I know. Well. Yes, all the projects. So I have a lot of questions, but I will ask you maybe tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, because it's specific questions how to make our Georgian editions. So before make it so online, so critical, to make it more fluent. Thank you very much.